Imagine a place where history isn't just written in books, but etched into the very stone. A place where the echoes of a brutal past refuse to fade. We all know the legend of the Alamo, a symbol of courage and sacrifice. But what if, beneath the Texas sun, something far more chilling still lingers? Tonight, we delve into the story of Dr. Evelyn Reed, a woman of science who believed only in what she could see and touch, until the Alamo itself began to whisper its forgotten secrets, and a discovery in the dust bound her to a past more personal and terrifying than she could ever have imagined. The Texas sun beat down on Dr. Evelyn Reed, a relentless, dry heat that seemed to bake the very air. She stood, meticulously dressed in practical field attire, amidst the hallowed grounds of the Alamo, a place steeped in blood and legend. As a historical preservationist, Evelyn had always found solace in the tangible, the verifiable. Dates, documents, architectural integrity. These were her anchors. Emotions, the messy, unpredictable currents of human experience, were best kept at arm's length, a professional detachment she'd cultivated over years. Prioritizing facts over the often distorting lens of sentiment, her latest project, overseeing a controversial new restoration phase at the Alamo, was meant to be just another meticulously planned endeavor. It involved uncovering previously sealed off sections, a rare opportunity to peel back layers of history, brick by ancient brick. The Alamo itself was a paradox, conic, instantly recognizable, yet strangely quiet. Even with the trickle of tourists, a profound stillness clung to its ancient walls, a silence that felt less like peace and more like a held breath. The air, thick with the scent of old stone and dry earth, carried a subtle, almost imperceptible sense of lingering sorrow. A profound unease that seemed to hum just beneath the surface of the sun-drenched courtyard. Evelyn, ever the scientist, attributed it to the sheer weight of history, the collective memory of a brutal siege. Her initial days were a blur of surveying, mapping, and directing the small crew, but as they began to expose older, deeper sections, the anomalies started. Faint, unidentifiable sounds would drift to her ears when she was alone in the quieter corners. A distant shout, a child's muffled cry, sounds that seemed to emanate from nowhere and dissipate into the dry air. She dismissed them as the creaks of an old structure, the wind playing tricks, or perhaps the distant city noise echoing oddly. Lights in the newly opened, unlit sections would flicker. Not just a gentle dimming, but a rapid, almost frantic pulse, even before any temporary wiring was fully installed. And then there were the sudden, inexplicable drops in temperature. Pockets of profound cold that would materialize in specific areas, chilling her to the bone before vanishing as quickly as they appeared. She'd blame drafts, faulty circuits, anything but the unsettling truth that was beginning to prickle at the edges of her rational mind. One sweltering afternoon, as the crew broke for lunch, Evelyn remained in a newly excavated trench, meticulously examining a section of the original foundation. The earth was loose here, disturbed by centuries of shifting ground in previous, less careful excavations. As her trowel scraped against something hard and metallic, a jolt went through her. It was an incredibly old, tarnished silver locket, its surface dulled by time and soil. Its design suggested the mid-19th century, a relic from the very era of the siege. Her heart gave an unexpected thump. This was a personal artifact, not a military one. With trembling fingers, Evelyn pried open the locket. Inside, nestled beneath a thin, clouded pane of glass, was a miniature, faded daguerreotype. It depicted a young woman, her expression solemn, her eyes wide and dark. Evelyn's breath hitched. The woman in the daguerreotype looked strikingly, almost unnervingly, similar to Evelyn herself. The same high cheekbones, the same intense gaze, the same unusual curve to her lips. It was a resemblance too profound to be mere coincidence. The locket, buried in the dust of the Alamo, had found its way to her establishing an immediate, inexplicable, and deeply unsettling connection to the past. It wasn't just a historical site. It was a living, breathing testament to lives lived and lost. And one of those lives, it seemed, was inextricably linked to her own. The dust of the Alamo, she realized, held more than just echoes. It held secrets, and they were beginning to stir. The locket, cool and ancient against her skin, felt like a burning ember in Evelyn's pocket. The daguerreotype's faded gaze, so uncannily like her own, haunted her. Her scientific mind, a fortress built on empirical data, was under siege. Coincidence? Genetic anomaly. The rational explanations felt flimsy, like paper-thin walls against a rising tide of the inexplicable. She spent the rest of the day in a daze. The Alamo's familiar stones now seeming to watch her, their silence no longer peaceful but expectant. The escalation of phenomena was swift and relentless, as if the locket had been a key, unlocking something ancient and restless within the Alamo's walls. Objects related to the siege, previously secured in display cases or storage, began to appear in impossible locations. Tarnished musket ball, authenticated and catalogued, was found resting on her desk in the temporary office she'd set up within the compound, its lead still pitted as if from impact. A fragmented piece of a worn leather uniform, marked with an almost illegible initial, materialized on a newly uncovered windowsill in the barracks, a place she knew had been thoroughly cleared hours before. These weren't misplaced items, they were deliberate placements, almost as if someone or something was trying to communicate. The sounds, too, sharpened. The distant shouts Evelyn had dismissed as city noise now resolved into disembodied whispers, low and guttural, like men muttering orders in a forgotten tongue. She'd hear the distinct clink of metal, the scrape of boots on stone, the ragged breathing of men in desperate combat, all emanating from empty rooms. The most chilling was the rhythmic, almost frantic sound of footsteps, heavy and purposeful, pacing above her in the long barrack room, even when the floor above was entirely clear of human presence. Each thud resonated not just in the old timbers, but in her very bones, a palpable, sorrowful presence pressing down on her. Evelyn's meticulously constructed psychological defenses began to crumble. Her scientific detachment, once her greatest asset, became a burden. She found herself jumping at shadows, her heart hammering at every creak. Sleep offered no escape. Her dreams became vivid, unsettling fragments of the Alamo's final days. She saw flashes of faces, desperate and grim, heard the roar of cannons and the crack of muskets, smelled gunpowder and blood, skied wake in a cold sweat, the sensations so real they lingered, blurring the lines between her reality and the historical events. The daguerreotype of the woman in the locket began to appear in these dreams, her eyes wide, her expression a silent plea. One evening, the psychological strain culminated in a terrifying scene. Evelyn was working late, alone, in the newly exposed section of the long barrack, meticulously documenting a series of scorch marks on the inner wall. The sun had long set, leaving the Alamo bathed in the eerie glow of the city lights filtering over the high walls. In the stark beam of her headlamp, suddenly the air grew heavy, thick with the smell of smoke and fear. The temperature plummeted, and a profound, agonizing scream tore through the silence, not from outside, but from within the very stones around her. It was followed by the deafening roar of cannon fire, the sharp crack of muskets, and the guttural shouts of men, as if the siege was replaying around her in terrifying, visceral detail. She saw brief, distorted flashes of figures in period clothing, a man clutching his chest, collapsing, another raising a bayonet, his face contorted in a silent roar, a woman shielding a child, her eyes wide with terror. They were translucent, shimmering, caught in moments of extreme pain and terror, their forms flickering like dying embers before they vanished. The sounds faded, leaving her gasping for breath, her ears ringing, the stench of gunpowder still in her nostrils. It wasn't a vision. It was a memory, imprinted on the very air, and she had been forced to witness it. Driven by this terrifying, undeniable experience, Evelyn intensified her historical discovery. She pored over forgotten accounts, dusty regimental rosters, and personal letters from the Alamo defenders, seeking a name, a story that resonated with the daguerreotype or with the specific emotional tenor of the haunting. She found a bundle of letters tucked away in an overlooked archive box written by a young Texian recruit named Thomas Vance to his sister, Clara. The name Clara struck her, an echo of the woman from the urban horrors narrative, though she pushed that fleeting thought aside. Thomas's letters spoke of his sister, his hope for a future after the war, and a small silver locket he carried containing her image, a constant reminder of home and the promise of return. He described Clara as having a distinctive, almost unnerving intensity in her gaze. Evelyn's heart hammered. The locket, the daguerreotype, the resemblance. It wasn't just a lost soul, it was his lost soul, and the woman in the locket, his sister, was the key. He had died at the Alamo, his promise unfulfilled, his locket lost. And now, Evelyn, with her unsettling resemblance to Clara, had found it. The Alamo wasn't just a place of echoes, it was a place of unfinished business, and she, Evelyn Reed, was now inextricably bound to it. The name Thomas Vance, etched into the faded letters, resonated with a chilling clarity. His sister, Clara, whose daguerreotype now lay in Evelyn's locket, had been the anchor of his hope, a promise of a future that never came. The connection was undeniable, terrifyingly personal. Evelyn wasn't just observing a haunting. She was entangled in a family tragedy, a historical echo that reached across centuries. The Alamo wasn't just a site of collective sacrifice. It was the final resting place of her own kin, a place where an oath had been left unfinished. Evelyn realized the haunting wasn't merely a residual energy imprint of the siege's violence. It was focused, driven by the specific, profound distress of Thomas Vance. His spirit, she now understood, was the primary force behind the escalating phenomena. He wasn't malevolent, but tormented, desperate to communicate, to complete whatever final task had been denied him in his last moments. His emotional state, a blend of fierce loyalty, desperate hope, and profound abandonment, mirrored a hidden vulnerability in Evelyn herself, her own carefully guarded emotional detachment, her fear of deep connection after past hurts. The shared trauma intensified, becoming a visceral, inescapable reality. Evelyn no longer just witnessed Thomas's final moments in her dreams. She experienced them. One night, she woke with a strangled cry, her lungs burning, her throat raw. She had been Thomas, huddled with his comrades, hearing the Mexican bugle call of Degelo. No quarter, no mercy. She felt the searing heat of a bayonet thrust, the crushing impact of a musket butt against his ribs, the suffocating sensation of being trampled in the chaos. The agony was real, sharp, and overwhelming, forcing her to relive the terror and pain of his final, desperate breaths. She could feel the blood, hot and sticky, on her hands, the metallic taste of it in her mouth. She briefly lost control of her own body, her limbs twitching as if mimicking Thomas's dying convulsions, before she snapped back to her own consciousness, drenched in sweat, the phantom pain lingering in her chest. The spirit wasn't just showing her, it was forcing her to become him, to internalize his suffering, to truly understand his unfinished oath. Driven by this horrifying empathy, Evelyn knew Thomas was trying to guide her. She returned to the newly opened section of the Alamo where she'd found the locket, now convinced it was a deliberate placement, not mere chance. The area was a small, previously sealed-off chamber, likely a storage room or a small guard post during the siege. The air within it was thick and heavy. Charged with a palpable sorrow, she ran her hands along the rough-hewn stone walls, searching for any anomaly. Her fingers brushed against a loose stone, almost imperceptible against the ancient mortar. With a surge of adrenaline, Evelyn pried the stone loose. Behind it was a hidden, previously unknown chamber, a narrow, dark tunnel barely large enough to crawl through. The air inside was still, undisturbed for nearly 2 centuries. Inside, nestled in a small, dry alcove, she found not just more artifacts, but a chilling, perfectly preserved personal belonging of Thomas Vance. It was a small, leather-bound diary, its pages brittle but intact, and, tucked within its folds, a crude, hand-drawn map. The diary was a testament to Thomas's final days, his hopes, his fears, and his desperate longing for home. He wrote of his last conversations with comrades, his unwavering belief in their cause, and his final, desperate promise to a dying friend to deliver the message. The map scrawled on a piece of parchment was not of the Alamo, but of the surrounding land, marking a specific, obscure location. Outside the fort's walls, a place Evelyn recognized as a forgotten, overgrown section of an old ranch, now swallowed by urban sprawl. This suggested Thomas's unresolved issue extended far beyond the immediate site of the Alamo. Then came the twist. Evelyn meticulously examined the diary. A small, almost invisible symbol caught her eye, drawn repeatedly in the margins of Thomas's last entries. It was a stylized V intertwined with a broken arrow. She remembered the locket, the faded daguerreotype of Clara. She had dismissed the resemblance as uncanny. But now, holding Thomas's diary, a chilling thought solidified. She pulled out the locket, comparing the faded image to her own reflection in the polished silver. The V symbol, T, uncanny resemblance. Her own family name, passed down through generations, was Vance. A cold dread, deeper than any supernatural chill, washed over her. Thomas Vance was not just the lost soul of the Alamo. He was her lost soul. The woman in the daguerreotype, Clara, was her distant ancestor, and Thomas, her brother, was Evelyn's direct lineage. The diary, the locket, the map, they were not just historical artifacts. They were a direct message from her own blood, a desperate plea from a forgotten ancestor. The haunting was not random. It was a familial burden, a historical injustice reaching out from the past, demanding to be set right. Evelyn, the meticulous historian who prioritized facts over emotions, was now inextricably bound to the very heart of the Alamo's tragedy. A direct participant in its unfinished oath, the revelation of her familial link to Thomas, Vance, and Clara, the echoes of her own bloodline crying out from the past, had shattered Evelyn's carefully constructed world. The Alamo was no longer just a historical site. It was a grave, a monument to her own ancestors' unfinished business. The map, scrawled in Thomas's frantic hand, became her new obsession, a tangible link to the truth he had died trying to deliver. It depicted not the fort, but a specific, obscure location outside its walls, a place she recognized as a forgotten, overgrown section of an old ranch, long since swallowed by the relentless expansion of urban San Antonio, driven by a desperate need to understand, to fulfill Thomas's final, desperate promise. Evelyn stepped outside the Alamo's historical confines. Her investigation led her away from the hushed reverence of the fort and into the jarring, different pulse of the modern city. She spent days poring over obscure land deeds at the county clerk's office, cross-referencing faded property lines with Thomas's crude map. The bustling streets, the blare of car horns, the indifferent rush of pedestrians. It all stood in stark contrast to the historical weight she carried. The city's vibrant, uncaring energy highlighted her growing isolation in this pursuit of the unseen. She felt like a phantom herself, moving through a world that couldn't comprehend the spectral burdens she now bore. Her inquiries at local historical societies and among independent researchers were met with polite but firm skepticism. Fanciful, one elderly archivist had sniffed, dismissing Thomas's map as a child's doodle. "There's nothing of historical significance out there, Dr. Reed, just urban sprawl." This dismissal only fueled Evelyn's resolve. She knew the truth lay hidden, buried not just by time, but by something more deliberate. Her relentless digging eventually led her to an unlikely ally, a quirky, reclusive antique dealer named Silas Blackwood. His shop, tucked away on a dusty side street, was a chaotic treasure trove of forgotten Texas history. Silas, with his thick spectacles and a perpetual scent of old paper, had an almost encyclopedic knowledge of local lore and dismissed legends. He listened to Evelyn's story with an unblinking intensity, his eyes gleaming with a strange, knowing light. He recognized the symbols on Thomas's map, hinting at a forgotten land dispute, shadowy figure from the post-Alamo era who had acquired vast tracts of land under suspicious circumstances. Some secrets Silas had rasped. His voice, like dry leaves, are buried deeper than graves, Dr. Reed, and some folks prefer they stay that way. Silas became her confidant, her guide through the labyrinthine historical records. He found old newspaper articles hinting at a land grab, a legal battle that was mysteriously quashed, and the sudden, unexplained wealth of a prominent San Antonio family, the Lockharts, whose ancestors had arrived shortly after the siege. The pieces began to click into place, forming a horrifying mosaic of betrayal and greed. The message Thomas died to deliver wasn't just a personal one. It was about a hidden truth, a grave injustice tied to the very land the Alamo defenders had died for. Then came the character death, a terrifying scene that solidified Evelyn's peril. One crisp evening, after a particularly fruitful day of research with Silas, Evelyn called him to discuss a new lead. No answer. She tried again and again. A cold dread seeped into her bones. She drove straight to his shop. The lights were off, the closed sign askew. The front door was unlocked. A faint, sickly, sweet smell, like overripe fruit mixed with something metallic, hung in the air. Evelyn pushed the door open, her heart hammering. The shop was in disarray, shelves overturned, antique glass shattered. Silas was found slumped over his cluttered counter, his face frozen in a rictus of pure, unadulterated terror. His eyes were wide, staring at something unseen, and a thin trickle of dark, congealed blood ran from his nose and ears. There was no obvious wound, no sign of struggle, no indication of forced entry beyond the unlocked door. It was as if his very soul had been scared out of him. The police, when they arrived, were baffled, citing a sudden, massive stroke. But Evelyn knew. The entity, the human architect of oblivion, Silas had hinted at, had found him. It had silenced him. The death was a chilling warning, a grotesque punctuation mark on the danger she now faced. As the police processed the scene, Evelyn, numb with shock and grief, felt a sudden vibration in her pocket. It was her phone, an unknown number. She almost didn't answer, her hands shaking, but a desperate instinct, a sense of an unseen presence, urged her. She answered, a voice clear and resonant, yet with an ancient, almost ethereal quality, spoke directly into her ear. It wasn't Thomas. It was different, older. He found it. The voice whispered, calm and sorrowful, the truth. And they silenced him, but they cannot silence us all. The deed is in the old well, the Lockhart well, beneath the false bottom. Go now, before it is too late for you, too. The call disconnected. Evelyn stared at her phone, her mind reeling. The Lockhart well, a name from Silas's research, a property owned by the very family he'd suspected. This was not Thomas. It was another spirit, an older, perhaps more powerful entity, one that had been watching, waiting, and now, finally, intervening. She was not alone in this fight, but the allies she now found were not of this world, and the game had just become infinitely more dangerous. The disembodied voice, ancient and sorrowful, had pointed her to the Lockhart well. Silas was dead, silenced by a force more insidious than any ghost. Evelyn clutched the phone, the cold dread of the past now intertwined with the chilling reality of a living, breathing enemy. The Lockhart family, whose sudden wealth had coincided with Thomas Vance's forgotten land dispute, was no longer a historical footnote. They were the architects of oblivion, actively burying the truth. Armed with a cryptic clue, Evelyn drove to the outskirts of San Antonio, to the sprawling, manicured estate that now stood on the land Thomas Vance's map had indicated. The property was immense, a testament to generations of wealth, a stark contrast to the humble, forgotten ranch it once was. She found the old well, a crumbling stone structure half hidden by overgrown ivy, tucked away near the boundary of the estate, far from the main house. It looked innocuous, a relic of a bygone era. Her heart hammered as she peered into its depths. The water was dark, stagnant, remembering the voice S-words. Beneath the false bottom, Evelyn found a rusted iron ring set into the stone lip. With a grunt of effort, she pulled a section of the well's inner lining, disguised as natural stone, slowly pivoted inward, revealing a small, dry cavity beneath the waterline. Inside, wrapped in oilskin, was a bundle of brittle, yellowed documents. Indeed, as Evelyn's fingers closed around the bundle, a shadow fell over her. She spun around, her breath catching in her throat. Standing there, framed against the setting sun, was a man in an impeccably tailored suit. He was tall, with sharp, intelligent eyes that held a chilling, almost predatory glint. His face was unlined, handsome, but devoid of warmth. He was Marcus Lockhart, the current patriarch of the family, a man whose name Evelyn had seen on countless historical society donor lists, a pillar of the community. "Dr. Reed," he said, his voice smooth as polished stone, yet laced with an icy menace that made the hairs on Evelyn's arms prickle. Always so dedicated to history. Some histories, however, are best left undisturbed. The twist hit Evelyn with the force of a physical blow. The true malevolent force wasn't a spectral entity, but this man, this living, breathing human being, whose family had built their empire on a lie, on a betrayal of the very men who had died for this land. He was the architect of oblivion, maintaining his family's power and reputation by actively suppressing the truth, manipulating events, and eliminating anyone who got too close. Silas, she now understood, had been just one in a long line of accidents. "You killed Silas," Evelyn whispered, the words a raw accusation. Marcus's smile didn't reach his eyes. Regrettable necessity. He was ... persistent. "Like you. A shame. Such a bright mind, wasted on forgotten grievances." He took a step closer, his presence radiating a cold, calculated malevolence that was far more terrifying than any ghost. "My ancestors acquired this land, fair and square. The details are ... complex, but the outcome is immutable. This land, this legacy, is ours, and no dusty deed, no restless spirit will change that." He knew about the spirits. The realization sent a fresh wave of horror through Evelyn. He wasn't just a powerful man. He was aware of the supernatural, perhaps even using it, or at least manipulating the conditions that fueled it. "Thomas Vance's deed," Evelyn said, clutching the oilskin bundle tighter. "It proves the land was stolen, Kent. It proves the defenders were betrayed." Marcus chuckled, a dry, humorless sound. "A minor detail, Dr. Reed, a historical footnote, easily dismissed, just as your little theories will be. You see, I know about your ... sensitivities, your visions, your connections to the past. You're fragile, Dr. Reed, easily broken, like all who try to dig where they don't belong. I know about your own detachment, your fear of emotional connection, okay? It makes you vulnerable, perfect target for self-destruction. Wouldn't you agree?" His words were a chilling echo of her own deepest insecurities, proving he had been watching her, studying her, perhaps even subtly manipulating her path, just as the urban entity had done in New York. The horror was not just in his threat, but in his intimate knowledge of her soul. He reached out, his hand moving with deceptive speed, aiming for the deed. Just as his fingers brushed the oilskin, the air around them crackled with an unseen energy. Sudden, violent gust of wind, impossibly strong for the still evening, erupted from the mouth of the well, carrying with it the distinct scent of gunpowder and old blood. The ancient stones of the well itself began to vibrate, emitting a low, mournful hum that quickly escalated into a deafening, guttural roar. Marcus recoiled, his composure momentarily shattered, his eyes wide with a flicker of genuine fear. From the depths of the well, a spectral hand, translucent and shimmering, shot out, not touching Marcus, but sending a powerful, invisible force that slammed him backward. He stumbled, falling hard onto the ground, his face contorted in pain and shock. The air around him shimmered, and for a terrifying second, Evelyn saw it. A brief, distorted flash of a figure in a ragged Texian uniform, its face a mask of furious defiance, before it vanished. It was Thomas. He was here. He was fighting. Spirits were not just echoes, okay? Powerful, and they were protecting the truth. Evelyn scrambled backward, clutching the deed, her heart pounding with a mix of terror and exhilaration. The human antagonist, Marcus Lockhart, was real and terrifying. Toya, so too were her allies, the lost souls of the Alamo, and they were ready to unearth the truth, no matter the cost. Marcus Lockhart lay sprawled on the ground, his tailored suit dusted with earth, his face contorted in a mask of shock and fear. The spectral force that had slammed him back from the well was gone, leaving only the scent of ozone and the lingering chill of ancient fury. Evelyn, clutching the oilskin bundle, scrambled back, her heart a frantic drum against her ribs. The human antagonist was real, terrifyingly so, but her allies, the lost souls of the Alamo, were real too, and they had just shown their hand. She didn't wait. Marcus, regaining his footing, would be after her. She fled the Lockhart estate, the deed clutched tight, the ancient voices warning echoing in her mind. Before it is too late for you, too. Her mind raced, piecing together a desperate plan. The truth needed to be exposed, not just to a few historians, but to the world. And there was only one place to do it, the Alamo itself. The annual Remember the Alamo Gala was tonight, a lavish affair where San Antonio's elite, including Marcus Lockhart, would gather. It was a stage, and Evelyn intended to use it, spent the next few hours in a frantic, almost manic state, digitizing the deed, preparing a concise presentation of her findings, and contacting the few journalists she knew who weren't beholden to the Lockhart family's influence. She knew the risk. Marcus would be there, and he would not hesitate to silence her permanently. As twilight deepened, casting long, dramatic shadows across the Alamo grounds, Evelyn arrived. The courtyard was transformed, strung with elegant lights, filled with a murmur of polite conversation and the clinking of champagne glasses. Marcus Lockhart, impeccably composed despite his earlier ordeal, stood by the main entrance, greeting guests, his eyes scanning the crowd with a predatory intensity. He saw her, a flicker of cold recognition, then a dismissive sneer. He clearly believed her to be a deluded nuisance, easily handled. Evelyn found a small, makeshift podium set up for a brief opening address by the mayor. She waited, her heart pounding, the weight of centuries of injustice pressing down on her. As the mayor concluded, Evelyn, with a surge of adrenaline, stepped forward, interrupting the polite applause. A hush fell over the crowd as all eyes turned to her. Ladies and gentlemen, Evelyn's voice, though trembling, resonated with unexpected authority. My name is Dr. Evelyn Reed. I am a historical preservationist, and tonight I am here to reveal a truth that has been buried for nearly 2 centuries. Marcus Lockhart, from across the courtyard, began to move, a dark, determined figure cutting through the stunned crowd. The heroes of the Alamo, Evelyn continued, holding up a projected image of Thomas Vance's deed, died not just for Texas, but for a promise. Terry, a promise betrayed. This document, this deed, proves that the land they fought and died on was illegally seized, stolen from its rightful owners by the ancestors of a prominent family, the Lockhart family. A gasp rippled through the crowd. Marcus's face, once composed, contorted into a mask of furious rage. Ata, this woman is delusional, he bellowed, his voice echoing across the courtyard. A charlatan. She's disrespecting the sacred memory of our heroes. But as Marcus lunged forward, intent on silencing Evelyn, the Alamo itself seemed to come alive. The air grew heavy, thick with the scent of gunpowder and the metallic tints of blood. The elegant lights strung across the courtyard flickered wildly, then exploded in showers of sparks, plunging the grounds into a chaotic, terrifying gloom. Save for the emergency lights that cast long, distorted shadows from the ancient walls, from the very ground beneath their feet. The sounds of the siege erupted, not faint echoes, but a terrifying, overwhelming sensory experience. The deafening roar of cannons, the sharp crack of muskets, the guttural shouts of men, the screams of the dying, spectral figures, translucent and shimmering, materialized amidst the terrified guests. Defenders in tattered Texan uniforms clashed with shadowy Mexican soldiers, their ghostly forms locked in an eternal, agonizing battle. A spectral cannonball ripped through the air, sending a wave of pure dread through the crowd. Guests screamed, scrambling, tripping over each other in a desperate attempt to escape the invisible onslaught. Objects flew, champagne glasses shattered, tables overturned, all propelled by an unseen force. The very ground beneath their feet began to tremble, a deep, resonant vibration that shook the foundations of the historic mission. It was the full, terrifying manifestation of the siege, brought forth by the collective, amplified presence of the lost souls, enraged by the presence of the architect of oblivion. Marcus Lockhart, caught in the terrifying maelstrom, stumbled backward, his face pale with a fear more profound than any Evelyn had seen. He saw them, he saw the spirits, its carefully constructed facade of control shattered. He knew the truth was out, and the spirits were its furious, undeniable witnesses. No, you won't. Marcus shrieked, his voice raw with desperation. He pulled a small, remote-like device from his pocket, his finger hovering over a button. Evelyn realized with a sickening lurch what it was: a detonator. He intended to destroy the Alamo, to bury the truth and everyone in it in a final, cataclysmic act of sabotage. He pressed the button. A low, ominous rumble began beneath the ground, growing rapidly. But before the full force of the explosion could erupt, the air around Marcus shimmered violently. The spectral figures of the Alamo defenders, their faces contorted in righteous fury, coalesced around him. Thomas Vance, his face grim and determined, was at the forefront. They didn't touch him, but their collective, overwhelming presence acted as a conduit. The energy of Marcus's own explosive device, now amplified and twisted by the spirit's will, surged back, not outward, but inward. Marcus Lockhart screamed, a sound of pure, unadulterated terror and agony as the very ground beneath him buckled. The spectral energy, infused with the power of his own destructive intent, consumed him. The earth opened beneath his feet, not with a violent explosion, but with a horrifying, imploding force, drawing him down into a chasm of darkness. The ground sealed itself with a sickening thud, leaving no trace, no body, only a faint, lingering scent of burnt ozone and despair. The explosion, meant to destroy the Alamo, had been turned against its architect, a karmic, supernatural demise. The spectral figures of the defenders slowly faded, the sounds of the siege receding. The emergency lights stabilized, casting a stark, unsettling glow on the terrified, bewildered crowd. The deed, still clutched in Evelyn's hand, was miraculously unharmed. The truth was out. The lost souls of the Alamo had finally unburied it, and their tormentor had been consumed by the very darkness he sought to wield. The aftermath of the Alamo Gala was a maelstrom. Chaos reigned for hours as terrified guests recounted impossible visions, and emergency services grappled with the inexplicable disappearance of Marcus Lockhart and the structural integrity of the ancient mission. The official explanation, quickly disseminated, cited a massive, localized gas leak and a resulting structural collapse, coupled with mass hysteria. But the whispers, fueled by hundreds of eyewitness accounts of spectral figures and impossible phenomena, spread like wildfire. Videos, shaky and distorted, showing fleeting glimpses of the ghostly siege, circulated online, dismissed by mainstream media as elaborate hoaxes, yet undeniable to those who had been there. Evelyn, still clutching the oilskin-wrapped deed, was whisked away by authorities, questioned for hours. Her testimony, though factual and precise, sounded like the ravings of a madwoman to the police. She presented the deed, the proof of the Lockhart family's centuries-old betrayal. The legal battle that ensued was brutal, protracted, and highly publicized. The Lockharts, despite Marcus's ignominious end, fought tooth and nail to protect their name and fortune. With the combination of Evelyn's meticulous historical evidence, the undeniable witness accounts at the gala, and the very real, very public disappearance of Marcus Lockhart proved too much. The truth, finally, was out. The land was rightfully returned to the descendants of its original owners, and the Lockhart family's empire crumbled, built on a foundation of lies and forgotten blood. Evelyn's professional life became a paradox. She was lauded by a fringe of independent historians and paranormal enthusiasts, but ostracized by the academic establishment. Her tenure at the Preservation Society was quietly terminated. She became a controversial figure, a pariah to some, a visionary to others. The public, fascinated and repulsed, devoured her story. She bore the professional backlash with a new, quiet strength. Her detachment, once a shield, had been shattered by the raw, visceral experience of Thomas Vance's death, by Silas's gruesome end, and by the terrifying power of the spirits. She carried the emotional weight of what she had uncovered, the profound injustice, the centuries of silent suffering. The Alamo, now free from the weight of the Lockhart's suppression, began to heal. The haunting, the tormenting echoes of the siege slowly subsided. Thomas Vance's spirit, Evelyn felt, had finally found peace. His presence, and that of the other defenders, no longer manifested as agony, but as a subtle, comforting energy, sense of quiet vigilance that permeated the ancient walls. The Alamo remained a site of profound historical trauma, but now it was also a testament to resilience, to truth, and to the enduring power of memory. Evelyn's perspective on history, truth, and the human spirit was irrevocably altered. She no longer saw history as a collection of dusty facts, but as a living, breathing tapestry woven with human emotion, sacrifice, and injustice. She dedicated her life to uncovering other suppressed historical narratives, becoming a champion for forgotten voices, both living and dead. She wrote books, gave lectures, and consulted on projects that sought to bring hidden truths to light, often in places where history felt unusually heavy. But the encounter had left her with more than just a new purpose. It left her changed, fundamentally, irrevocably. The connection she had forged with Thomas Vance and the other spirits had not severed with the truth's revelation. It had deepened, becoming a permanent part of her. She began to notice subtle changes in herself when she visited other historical sites across America. Old battlefields, forgotten plantations, abandoned mining towns. She felt a heightened sensitivity. She could sense the lingering emotions, the echoes of past suffering, sometimes even brief, unsettling visions of other historical tragedies, as if the veil between worlds had thinned for her alone. Then came the final, chilling twist. One afternoon, while researching a forgotten massacre site in a remote corner of the American West, Evelyn felt a familiar, insidious cold. Not the sorrowful chill of a lost soul, but a predatory, calculated cold. She looked up from her notes, her gaze sweeping across the desolate landscape, and she saw them, not ghosts, but living people. A group of impeccably dressed individuals, moving with a quiet, almost unnatural purpose. Their faces devoid of empathy, their eyes holding that same chilling, predatory gleam she had seen in Marcus Lawcat's. They were subtly altering historical markers, removing old documents, their actions designed to obscure, to erase. They were the architects of oblivion, a network far larger and more pervasive than she had ever imagined. Evelyn realized, with a profound, terrifying certainty, that her unique connection to the spectral world had given her a new, terrifying ability. She could now see them. She could sense their presence, their insidious work, their feeding on the despair of suppressed histories. The Alamo had been just one battle. Marcus Lockhart, just one soldier in a much larger, ongoing and unseen war between truth and oblivion. And Evelyn Reed, the meticulous historian who had once sought only facts, was now burdened with the echoes of countless other lost souls across the nation. Marked as the next target in a fight that spanned centuries, a fight she was now destined to lead. The past was not dead. It was alive, and it was hungry. Loved Evelyn's spooky find at the Alamo. Smash that like button, subscribe for more spooky tales from history.